G'day guys and welcome to AskaPathfinder's Q&A. Today we're going to be talking about mass combat. Now, I did try this stream like literally 2 seconds ago, but I actually had a whole bunch of technical problems, so hopefully all of that's set out now. And I am actually recording and streaming at the same time instead of streaming, not recording, I don't know. Anyway, so today's topic we're going to be looking at mass combat. How to deal with it, and what are some really cool tips and tricks for running our campaign when there are quite a lot of people and things involved. First of all, let's break it down into what is mass combat. Mass combat is a combat encounter that is going to be taking place with many different players and NPCs involved in the battle. The two types that I break down are minor and major types of mass combat. A minor type of mass combat will involve the players controlling their characters engaged in a combat with a large amount of NPCs and obstacles. A major type of mass combat involves your players taking control of armies. So they're not necessarily playing their characters more than they are playing their characters plus 100 soldiers running across the battlefield. Now, both ways are really fun and really interesting, but I've often found that players opt out of large-scaled mass combat. It's a really kind of tricky thing to do because some players do really like it but can't play it well. Some GMs would love to be able to use it, but obviously there's a bit of rules lawyering that gets involved. No matter what your preference, mass combat does have its place at your table, and you kind of want to make sure that you are really catering your home rules together with the existing rules in order to get what's best for your particular scenario. If you're looking for specific Pathfinder rules on how to deal with hardcore or the major mass combat, Ultimate Campaign actually does have a whole spread and a full list of really great rules for handling mass combat with armies, including hexagonal maps, being able to build your own stats for your own army based on the CR of who is in that army, turns in combat, battle phases. If you've ever used like the ship combat type thing, it's kind of paced very similarly with people being able to move your armies through particular hexes before they engage, and then take actions like their ranged attackers can now attack, or their melee attackers can now attack, or you can impose certain tactics and skills in order to give yourself bonuses to what is your DV, which is your defensive value, or your OV, which is your offensive value. So both things are kind of interesting, and I mean, look, I'm going to be honest with you guys, I'm not too keen on the whole army thing. Admittedly, I haven't played Kingmaker before, but it does seem to play rather a big hand in the kingdom building games, such as that one. Now, mass combat minor, I find, is a lot more common and does happen, and some people don't even realize it happens. What it involves is when your players are having to wait an absorbent amount of time for their NPCs to actually go through all their turns. This could be your PCs waiting for 20 goblins to take 20 different actions before they actually get their turn. It could be something along the lines of half your party being split and some of them being engaged in combat, some of them on another whole encounter dealing with something that doesn't necessarily have to be combat. It could be an obstacle, it could be an environmental hazard. Trying to negotiate and trying to kind of manage all of that can get really hectic and can be really difficult for a GM to try and wrangle. But at the end of the day, every GM has the potential to be able to split the group, to be able to wrangle their mass combat and make a really fun and engaging encounter. Here are a couple of tips that I've got for making encounters with mass amounts of people really fun, really engaging, and otherwise just save you a little bit of time and hassle. First, consolidate your roles. When you are dealing with a mass combat that involves, let's take the example of 20 goblins. You have a party of 4. Now, on average, each player should take 1 to 3 minutes to take their turn. On average. Now, yes, there are players who like to really get into their roleplay and start waxing lyrical about their actions. I draw my mighty blade, and with its shining saber I will cut into the darkness and stab at him with an upward angled slash, gashing his guts open for the world to see as crimson rubies of blood litter the ground before me. Okay, yes, but what do? Oh, I swing my sword. Yeah, okay, like, you've definitely got a mix of the people. But 1 to 3 minutes is a good approximation. Now, let's assume you have a party of 4. Each member of the party takes their average amount of time, and that leaves you with 8 minutes to take their turn in combat. Alternatively, you should also take the same measurement for your NPCs. So if you have your goblins, every goblin should take 1 to 3 minutes to resolve their turn. If you have 20 goblins involved, yeah, as you can probably see already, 40 minutes to take your NPC's turn means that they're waiting almost an hour before they can take their second turn, and players don't generally like that. Hell, no one really likes that. So how do we deal with this? Well, what I like to do firstly is to consolidate the roles into groups. Now, this group may be divisions of a small army. So we have, say, 5 spellcasters, 5 healers, 5 bards, and 5 warriors. And I will roll all of their roles together at the same time. So my warriors, they all rush forward, these goblins with swords and knives and all these other things, and they strike at my players. And I'm going to be targeting 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And all right, they rolled a 10, so they hits you, doesn't hit you. But I only roll once for all 5, because that means my calculation's simple, my calculation works super well, and, people kind of get that satisfaction of, well, if they all miss, they all miss. If they all fumble, and hooray for that. But there is a dreadful and awful other side of this, and that is, of course, if you go, all right, cool, my 5 warriors, they run out at my PCs, they have their swords, and they... Uh-oh. Yeah, natural 20. Okay, so I'm going to confirm that crit. Look at that. All 5 of them crit. Dave. Yep, that's right. That one guy. Sorry, Dave. You take 5 crits. Now, that doesn't work, obviously, because, well, yes, you've rolled 1 natural 20, and you, by all means, deserve a natural 20. But don't take the crit for all of them. Take the crit for the first guy, and pick one, or at least pick the first one to have hit, and make them land the crit. All of the other ones, absolutely guarantee the hit, roll the 20, carry it on, but don't follow through with the crit effects. Otherwise, you'll find that your players will start resenting that whole rolling consolidated. The second thing you want to remember is that when you get into a scenario where they're all rolling together, they're all defending and saving together as well. So if the group goes, all right, I'm going to cast Fireball on this big group of goblins. Very well. Roll 1 dice. They all succeed, they all fail. Now, a lot of players might take it in offense if you have everyone save, and it's like, well, what the hell? Why did they all save? How come, you didn't roll 1 at a time? I want you to roll 1 at a time because there's a greater chance that they all might... Yes, that is very true. It does happen. And this goes into the second thing about consolidating your rolls, which I will mention. So the first was obviously separating them by group. The second is all together. Now this is slightly different because it involves every single NPC encounter being rolled once. Now you can do this, but it comes at an inherent risk. And the inherent risk is it is a very big gap between live and die. Just as I made the point, if you roll once and you have saved and everyone saves, then of course your players are going to feel resentment towards that. But of course they'll never do it when they all fail. They'll be like, oh yeah, they all failed. That's players for you. When you create your encounter, you want to make sure that if you do, always roll like a percentage, right? So if you do succeed, like say I rolled a natural 20 against a fireball, what I then do is I'll roll and I'll go, okay, cool. So there's an 83%. So 83% will save against you. So in a group of 20, okay, roughly let's say that 4 guys did not make the save and they actually have to roll separately. All right, so of that, yes, 4 of them end up failing. So you still give them that option. You give them that chance. Be willing to kind of break it down. Be willing to kind of take liberties with that, because really, this is just a shortcut. It's not a means to kind of make an encounter harder. All right. So moving from that point, we then have trying to keep your players' turns flowing, and for that, time is of the essence. You always want to make sure that your players understand that they can't take 10, 20 minutes deciding their turn. They can't sit there and be reading through their notes going, okay, so this is this spell, and I'll go over here, and GM, what if I would use this spell with that spell, and then he came in afterwards, and then once he came in afterwards, what if I were to do this, and then, oh, look at that, I can do... Again, your players might try to do that, but you need to kind of keep a good leash on it. For me, what I like to tell players, especially in mass combat, is you have 5 minutes at the maximum. At which point, if you haven't declared your action and begun calculation, you are basically dazed for that round. You spend your time just trying to analyze what everyone is doing, because there are so many people. Of course, there are going to be times where your character is just overwhelmed. Like, okay, so the goblins are killing the druid, and the druid is his animal is under attack, but the archer's up there and he's still hidden, but he's fine. So what do I do? It happens. It happens both for us as a player, and it also happens for our characters as well. Best bit of advice if you're a player on the other side of this is don't take too long on your turn. Think about your action as the combat is going. Pay attention to what's going on and be like, all right, well, I'm going to, do that. And then, oh, okay, he's moved over here. Maybe I can do, work with it as your game is going. All right. The third and final thing I've got to mention is you've really got to look at making the encounter progress, right? A lot of combats tend to fall into what I like to call shin-kicking contests, okay? Which is, I hit you, you hit me, I hit you, you hit me, I hit you, you hit me, so on and so forth, until eventually someone buckles and falls down. Mass combat, when you use this particular type of fighting, is boring. I'm not even going to kind of sugarcoat it. It is boring. No one enjoys it. It's not fun. It's not engaging. It's not anything. So what you want to do is you want to make sure that after a while you start to change the pace and the rhythm of your game to keep it fun and energetic. A good example of this. 20 goblins are engaging your 4 players. I've separated them into groups of 5, and in the group of 5, they've gone through maybe 2 rounds, they've cut through a fair few of these goblins, but where to next? Well, it turns out that the spellcaster goblins have a plan up their sleeve. They have begun to start greasing the floor, and little known to them is the part of the second group has gone over to one of the bullseye lanterns in one of the shop windows and is looking at setting fire to this whole building. Suddenly you have a quest, or you've got an objective, and that objective becomes stop that goblin from setting us all on fire. The NPCs have taken their turn, you've progressed the story, and as an added bonus, you have added in a layer of drama, and you've made the combat more engaging. This is a good advice pretty much for any kind of fight, not just this particular one, but any that you're really doing at this point. So, yeah, be sure to try out some things. Change the dynamic of the environment. Go after what your player's objective is. So if the players are fighting these goblins because they're after an artifact, have them see the artifact and one of the goblins try to make a break for it. Quests aren't necessarily just for the narrative. Quests can be done in the middle of battle and in the middle of combat, and you need to kind of remember that, especially with mass combat, because there is so many different things. Alright, so the next thing is, of course, is what kind of things help you along the way with mass combat in general. In the bestiary number 6, which I've just pulled up, there is a type of creature, or at least a type of, a subtype of creature called the troop. Okay, now basically the troop is where you take a group of a race or a species and you put them together and you create one tangible encounter. It was reasonably well done. I've tried it maybe once or twice, so I'm not going to put my big stamp of approval and say, oh yes, you must absolutely try this. You know, it's good, but use it with caution, because of course there's a whole side of it which is a little bit difficult to manage, and I'll go over that in a second. So, similar to the way that swarms work, where everyone is working together to try and achieve an objective, troops are larger creatures who have gathered together and have the benefits of multiple different classes, specialities, races. Sticking with the goblin theme, I will just go over very quickly the goblin troop. Actually, you know what I'll also do? I will... can I do that? No. Sorry, 1 second. Let me... Bum. Can I... Nope, it's not letting me do that. Alright, never mind. Actually, it might. Give me a second. Apologies. Go, Michael. Aha. No. Okay, that's not working. Never mind. Alright, so the troop goblin basically works like this. You have a neutral evil small goblin humanoid troop, has a set initiative, falls onto the same initiative, has an AC, has hit points. Now, the hit points are based on what particular CR you're happening to deal with, along with how many creatures they are. In the case of this particular goblin troop, there's about 10 of these people here, so therefore, you know, roughly 10 hit die worth of creature. You have a set fort, reflex, and will. You gain troop traits, which are as follows. Let's see. Troop traits are... Alright. A troop is not subject to flanking, but is subject to critical hits and sneak attacks if the component creatures are then also subject to that. They're immune to any spells or effects that target a specific number of creatures, such as Disintegrate, and multiple spells such as... multiple targeting spells such as Haste, though it is affected by spells that target areas. Troops attack very similar to a swarm, but they still deal that same kind of damage. In the case of our goblins have the ability to use not only those troop abilities, but also there we go. Also Overwhelm. A goblin troop deals 3d6 points of damage with its troop attack to foes who share its space. So, if simply being adjacent to a troop of goblins will incur 2d6 points of damage as they just attack you and slash you and cut at you. If, however, they have you inside of them, similar to the way a swarm would work, then you would, of course, have the overwhelm problem. So yeah, that's kind of how they work. That's kind of how it goes. I do recommend trying it if you haven't tried it before. Again, I've only tried it very limitedly because, well, I've never really wanted to get into mass combat with goblins, to say the least. But yeah, so there's that as well. All right, now let's take a quick look at the Ultimate Campaign. So, Ultimate Campaign is a great book. It covers a whole bunch of really cool and interesting things, from mass combat to kingdom building to basically just trying to expand beyond the scope of just your PCs. Now, this type of mass combat, as I mentioned before, is major mass combat, and it has a whole bunch of stuff that is tied directly to the whole kingdom building thing. Your players do not play their characters. Well, they do, but they also don't. It's like they play their characters commanding the people who are involved in the armied encounters. Okay? So, page 234. So you have army stat blocks, which work based on the army's size. So 1 unit is a fine army size, which would be a CR equal to the individual creature -8. All the way up to an army of 2,000 units, which would be CR of the individual creature +8, and would be a colossal sized army. Now, these armies go through 3 different phases in that type of combat, which are the tactics phase, where the GM applies battle modifiers, things that might affect it, like rain, difficult terrain, whatever you may be. And each commander of each army then decides what type of tactic they would like to use in order to try and get some benefits. For example, to be on the defensive might give you a bonus to your AC, whereas to be reckless, you might eventually see that your attack goes up higher. You then have your range phase, where all your ranged attackers get to have their attacks and perform their actions. After which, you then have the melee phase, where the armies clash with one another and use their strategies in order to try and gain the advantage. Attacking and taking damage is very similar to the way that it works in regular combat, with your OM or your offensive maneuvers going up against their DV, which is their defensive value, as a 1d20 roll, and the one who gets the higher obviously either hits or defends. Each army has an amount of AC. Now hit points. The amount of hit points is a representation of morale, and when they get to the point of no morale, that means so many of them have been killed that in fact they are retreating to fight another day. Alright, so here's just a massive list of like army tactics. So as I mentioned before, during the tactics phase, a GM would use one of these things. So one example would be false retreat. Once per battle, your army can make a false retreat, luring the enemy deeper into your territory. On the phase your army makes a false retreat, it doesn't attempt an offensive check. On the phase after it uses this tactic, increase its offensive maneuver and defensive value by 6 against the target army. So that obviously would show you how you would basically be pulling your troops back and allowing yourself an advantage by basically skipping a turn. It plays more like a game of chess than a game of traditional role-playing, which is where it sort of changes a bit. Next up is your strategy. So obviously, as mentioned in the melee phase, you would then get to pick a strategy to determine how you want to roll for that particular turn. If you play defensively, you would increase your DV by 4, reduce your OM by 4, and the damage dealt would be -6. So this basically means that you are basically, consolidating your defensive strategy. If you want to be reckless, however, on the alternative, you would take a -4 to your DV, a +4 to your OM, and you would increase your damage by 6, meaning that you are doing a whole bunch of damage, but yeah, you're going to probably lose a whole bunch of people in order to do it. There are also some other little special actions here, like if you have good commanders or if you have notable NPCs being a part of groups, they provide various bonuses and things like that. And boons, lots and lots and lots of boons. And eventually, once the army has depleted, it had an exchange, they deplete resources. Now, this is where the resources come into contact with your kingdom building rules, because your resources consume what's called BP, or build points. Now, a kingdom has a certain amount of upkeep that they earn and create build points. Under normal circumstances, you would use build points to build town centers, to build barracks, to hire more mercenaries, or whatever the case may be. When you are in a battle, when you are in a war, these BPs are slowly being drained by having combat. So that's kind of how that works, and that's where it sort of goes. Alright, again, there's still tons and tons and tons of stuff to go over this, but I'm not going to sit here and bore you with all the minutiae details, because you guys can, head out and read up on this book yourself. What I will share with you, though, is, with any really reasonable luck, hoping all my stuff properly works. Don't do that. Okay. I will share with you this. Okay. Yes. Aha. Okay. Now, hopefully you guys will be able to see this. Okay. All right. So that is the mass combat army sheet. So this is pretty much what you would see from Ultimate campaign that has all the details that you need for your particular army. So starting obviously at the top, you've got your kingdom, you've got your capital, you know, the general who is in charge, your charisma modifier, proficiency soldier, which can be used to obviously, as I mentioned before, when your commanders are giving boons to your army. This is all what that's about. Significant characters. So again, if you've got multiple armies, because you can actually have multiple units, platoons, that's what you can do. And these are the army breakdowns. So who's in charge of that army, their alignment, their size, their type, hit points, the ACR, which is obviously, actually, what is the ACR? The ACR is, I don't know what the ACR is. Oh, right, sorry, that's the, how much they consume resources. DV is your defense, OM is your attack, tactics that you can use and that what you do use, resources that you've got, anything special, like if you've got spellcasters or special abilities or modifiers, and then your commander of that area and what exactly he is capable of doing. Okay, well, I hope that was as confusing for you guys as it was for me, because I'm going to be dead honest. As I mentioned right at the start, mass combat is fun, it's interesting, but it's a trick to handle. If you are really into the kind of hardcore mass combat, yeah, by all means, pick up Ultimate Campaign, go through it with a fine-tooth comb. I might make a video about it at some point or another, but we'll have to see where that goes. If there's enough call for it, I'll do anything, really. If you aren't really into it and you just really want to kind of have more your PCs being in charge of everything, go for the minor mass combat, where it's just an army of people. You control, like, say, your PC's allies and just do some stuff off at the side. And your PCs can focus on their gameplay, their characters, and what they're doing. A great example of this is Skull and Shackles, which talks about, like, how to do ship-to-ship battle, because obviously there's like 20-30 people aboard the ship and you've got 4 people, so where is everyone else? It's always just considered that everyone else is engaged in their own battle. These guys are fighting these other NPCs and those guys are fighting those other NPCs, but you guys are fighting the notable people. You might have someone run out at you unexpectedly, sure, that's perfectly fine, but it's still focused on you and the PCs having a more notable battle than just fighting mass amounts of nameless weaklings. All right. Well, guys, thank you very much for joining us. I hope you enjoyed this. I'm just going to be doing these irregularly, so if you have caught this live, then, you know, thank you for joining me. If you have not and you are viewing this later on, I do apologize. This is such a long and weird video. But if you do have any questions, please leave a comment below. I would love to be able to talk about and research some of these stuff that you are interested in, because that's what I love doing. I love this game. It's an amazing chance for me to sort of test my knowledge and go through my copious amounts of books in order to try and figure stuff out. And if you like this video and you want to see more like it, hit that like button, hit that subscribe button. If you want to check out some of the other stuff I do do some stuff with Guy from How to Be a Great Game Master over and the Bacon Battalion. If you haven't checked them out already, go over to those channels and, you know, say hi, or at least say hi from me. And of course, if you want to help us out, come visit us on Facebook at facebook.com/AskaPathfinder. I do some articles there, which is really fun, and a whole bunch of other, you know, sort of chat games and fun little things there. If you want to talk to me directly, come visit me at discord.me/AskaPathfinder, and you can come chat with me directly if you've got any questions. And if you want to help us out a little bit, head on over to our Patreon site. I think at the moment it's called AskaPathfinder Unleashed, where you can become one of our cheeky goblins and help us try and make something look awesome with AskaPathfinder. And as always, guys, from me and from all of us at AskaPathfinder, keep your dice rolling and make sure your ideas stay mindworm free. Have a good one.